Mr. President, my good friend from Pennsylvania, Senator Toomey, and I have had an amendment that we put forth some time ago, several weeks ago now, back in the time when we did not know for sure whether or not sequestration was going to become a reality. We have some comments to make about that. I will be yielding to the senator from Pennsylvania in just a moment, but I first want to make an observation here that anytime a bureaucracy is forced to cut, they will find the one thing that the people of America want most, and that's what they will cut. And there's no better example of this than the FAA. And I went around with them for quite some time on the Pilot's Bill of Rights last summer. We were able to get something done, but I know they're a very powerful agency. There's no question about that. But just to give you an example of that, the FAA began furloughing traffic controllers and others too back just on April 21st. Now, this is what's interesting, and you have to really pay attention to this. The cuts that were going to come to the FAA through sequestration amounted to 5% of the FAA's budgets, bring it down to 2010 levels. Now, this is what's interesting. The FAA operations budget has grown by 109% since 1996. That's more than double since 1996. Now, on April 22nd, the first day after the furloughs took effect, over 400 flights were canceled and nearly 7,000 flights were delayed. That, my good friends, is just a way of making people miserable out there to bring them around to their way of thinking. Somehow that there's not enough fat in a bureaucracy that's more than doubled in the last 15 years that they have to take these drastic steps. The FAA has flexibility to reduce the cost, but they have not attempted to do that. Here's the thing, as I said very clearly, in 1996, the FAA's operating budget was $4.6 billion. $4.6 billion. In 2012, the operation budget is $9.7 billion. I don't know offhand, off the top of my head, of another bureaucracy that has grown that much in that period of time. The FAA operations budget has increased by $5.1 billion over 14 years. That's 109%. The furloughs of the air traffic controllers are expected to save only $200 million. I wish I had a chart here to show you what a small percent that $200 million is of the increase of $5.1 billion over 14 years. So I think it's very important that we talk about that in light of some of the things that we're trying to do with sequestration. Now, that was the FAA. Unfortunately, it's our defense system that's been taking all the hits. Here we have the defense is 18% of the budget, and they're taking 50% of the hits. This is after the president, through his programs, has knocked it down, the spending levels, by $487 billion over this 10-year period, and sequestration would be another $500 billion, which in the minds, in the statement of the Secretary of the Defense at that time, Secretary Panetta, would be devastating, to use his words. So that's where we are right now. Now, I was, when the majority leader last night introduced an amendment that would transfer the OCO funds, that's the overseas contingency operations, from the fiscal years of 14, 15, and 16 to offset the sequester impacts in the current year. I think this is not implementable, if I can use that word, because he uses future appropriations to offset current year spending. It is also a dangerous to continue to hollow out our military. I think that a couple of days ago, I made a talk about how we are comparable today in the hollow force that we're approaching that we were in the 1970s and the 1990s. And now it could actually be worse. In fact, in one of the hearings that we had, one of the chiefs of the military made the statement that this would not be just as bad, it would be worse. And so that's what we're faced with right now. And I think we need to look very carefully at this and make sure that we do not allow our war fighters. You know, every time you cut their money out of the OCO account, that increases risk. Increasing risk increases lives lost. And that's how serious this is. Now, back to our amendment that we put together some time ago. This was back before March 1st, which was the realization that it appeared that sequestration was going to be a reality. And it was this: if the whole purpose of sequestration is to save money out of the budget, and if you come along with something that says we will live with the top line that is dictated by sequestration, but we would ask that the chiefs of the services be allowed to make those decisions as to where the cuts would be. I had occasion to call all 5 service chiefs, and it's been reaffirmed in the last 2 weeks by them in public hearings, that if they could take this top line that would be so devastating to their particular service, and this was the Army, Navy, Marine, and Air Force, that if they could come up and determine where some of that was, would it be less devastating, number one? Number two, would you be able to do it? The answer was yes and yes. So I think that the senator from Pennsylvania and I had a very good idea, and we're here today to talk about that. And with that, I would yield to my friend from Pennsylvania.